Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Week That Really Was with John McGurk and Sarah Ryan for this week ending the 8th of November, 2024. It's been an interesting week. A lot of things have happened in the world. We're going to discuss probably the biggest one, and then we're going to discuss the biggest thing that's going to happen in Ireland within a few hours of you watching this podcast. I am joined, as ever, by my friend and colleague, Miss Sarah Ryan, who I think, by the smile on her face, had a pretty good week this week. Sarah, how are you?
I'm fine, John. I don't want to rub, anybody's nose and anything, but we gave some predictions last week. I believe you talked about the shy Kamala Harris voter, and
For those,
turns out they weren't shy at all because they didn't exist.
For those of you who are listening to this podcast rather than watching it on YouTube, Sarah, in the midst of that conversation, pulled out a red hat with the words "Make America Great Again" written on it. Now, obviously, here at Gript Media, we do not endorse any political candidates for office or take sides in political campaigns, but Sarah has broken that rule. And you're very I just hope you know, by the way, that some of the thirstier lads in the comments are going to be making GIFs of that moment, playing it over and over again. So at your own risk, you might become a feature on the internet that moment, because I think people will find it very exciting. What was your reaction to the election results, Sarah?
Well, I mean, I don't know how I've become the kind of pro-Trump person on this podcast, but I think I had a very strong sense that Trump was going to win for a while, for a variety of reasons. In the last couple of days, it started to get a bit wobbly. It just felt like the pressure, the build, there was it just started to feel like, I don't know, it was kind of slipping away. But I needn't have, I don't know why I even thought that, because I think I said to you on the phone at the time that the things I basically just let people who don't know what they're talking about on the internet put the fear into me about something that they don't know what they're talking about. And at the end of the day,
shy Kamala Harris voters.
Yeah. But at the end of the day, I think that ultimately what I was picking up and what I was proven to be right is that people have just gotten sick and tired of being talked down to, patronized, told what to vote, racially divided and told what way to vote because of what race they are. And, they came out and they absolutely kicked the shite out of the Democrats. And, whether or not Trump deserved to win is one conversation, but the Democrats deserved to lose, and they did.
Well, you called it better than my good friend, my new friend, Karl Rove, who was on this podcast on Monday, or so it's actually Tuesday when we recorded it on Monday. You weren't around, unfortunately, and gave his. I asked him who he thought would win. He said he didn't have any idea. He hadn't a clue, and you did. So kudos to you. You should be on Fox News, not Karl. Although Karl is great. So you did. You called it fairly well last week. I mean, I obviously have gotten a lot of ribbing this week because of my well-known Trump Derangement Syndrome and my hatred of all things orange. But, I mean, I was just looking at the results come in. And, I mean, the first thing to note is that early on in the night, as the results were coming in, it took for a while for the scale of the victory to become clear. And I think that's important. But I remember sitting, it was about 3 o'clock in the morning, between 3 and 4 o'clock in the morning, and I was watching results come in from Macomb County in Michigan, which is a county that Joe Biden had lost by 7 points to Donald Trump last time. And suddenly this random county in Michigan, which is a key county for the state, Trump was winning it by 17. And by that stage, it was just clear it was game over. Because the Democratic vote actually held up in the swing states. And that's something that's really interesting. I was going through the figures here today. Kamala Harris got more votes in Georgia than Joe Biden got in Georgia. She got more votes in North Carolina than Joe Biden got in North Carolina. And she got more votes in Wisconsin than Joe Biden got in Wisconsin. So in the first part of the night was your result, looking at the results, I mean, her vote is actually holding up well in the swing states. But two things happened. First of all, his vote surged in the swing states. And secondly, on a national level, Democrats just didn't bother showing up in places like New York and California and Illinois, which suggests to me that the average Democrat, the average sort of liberal who came out and voted in 2020, just wasn't enthused by her at all. And it was only really in the swing states where she did a big turnout effort that she was able to get people to vote for her, which just suggests that, I mean, the exit polls showed that 58% of people disapproved of Joe Biden's performance as president, and obviously her performance as vice president. It's almost impossible to win with that kind of headwind against you. It's a throw out the bums election, and they threw the old bum out and refused to put the new one in. So, I mean,
but it's also
just
an
a
interesting
devastating rejection of liberalism, really.
Yeah, I mean, it's also a fascinating and again, like not even to do with Trump, but just in general, it's an issue that kicks in the arse a lot of the nonsense that I hate the most about politics across the world at the moment. People care about cost of living, they care about feeding their families, they care about work, they care about whether they can put petrol in their car to get to work. They don't care about the Democrats being absolutely obsessed with wokeism, with transgenderism, with you pointed out last week Trump had an amazing ad, and it was Trump is for you and she's for they them. But they spent the 4 years in the White House inviting men dressed up as women in to talk about their 100 days as Dylan Mulvaney invited in to talk about his 100 days as a woman, or whatever nonsense that was. I didn't notice the Puerto Rican woman who's been working for 150 days as a cleaner. She wasn't invited, but Dylan Mulvaney, because he's been a woman, and another transgender, and a man dressed up as a woman claiming to be a lesbian at a conference about lesbians. All these people invited into the White House. Maybe people just got sick and tired of that shit when they can't afford to put petrol into their car.
It's interesting you mentioned that ad, and obviously I mentioned it last week, and I think I mentioned it a couple of weeks ago as well, because I kept seeing it coming up and up again. And after these elections are over, you sometimes get insights into what the campaigns were thinking. And there was a good piece this week. I think it was in Semaphore or Politico, one of them. But it mentioned that the Trump campaign showed that specific ad to focus groups all across the country, and they were shocked. They'd never seen a more effective ad, and that the average shift from Harris to Trump out of every 100 people was the 2.8, or well, obviously they're not saying it's 2.8 people, but 2.8% of people switched from Harris to Trump, having seen that ad.
Yeah.
That wins you an election. When it's a two-horse race. And there's no doubt that ad had and I think I was thinking more about this during the week. Obviously it wasn't just this ad, but that ad played during every NFL game I've watched so far this year, endlessly. Now, who watches NFL games? Young men, not just young white men, young Hispanic men, young black men. And the shift in those demographics was huge.
Mm-hmm.
Now, my good friend and Gript colleague, Laura Parents, has been talking to me about this all day today. And she just thinks it is the greatest thing ever that men have shifted towards Trump. And she makes a case which I find very persuasive. She says that it's the only rational thing to do if you're a young man, because it's the only way to kick back against what is now 15 years of young men are to blame for everything. Donald Trump, whatever else you say about him, is the one candidate who's not going to turn around after a criminal incident involving somebody and go, young men have to be better. He's not going to do that. He's not going to describe you as a toxic male. He's not going to say that you have to be cured of your testosterone. He's not going to do any of that stuff. So it's the only rational thing to do. And I think he has connected with young men in a way that no other politician in the Western world has done.
Yeah.
Do I approve of all the reasons for that connection? Not necessarily. But it's true. It's real. It's there.
But he's also connected. I mean, what do young men have? They have mothers. They have sisters. It's not just it spreads. I mean, I think there would have been a time, and we've talked about it before, where people will talk about likability of candidates and what the guy you want to go for a beer with and all that, and that's wonderful and that exists. But I think that there's a huge move away from that. Like all of the stuff. It was so personal, the campaign, and loads of people don't like Donald Trump. And I don't think Donald Trump is necessarily the kind of guy who's a nice person. But what the voters have said is they don't care. They don't care if he's nice or not. They want him to do the job. I guarantee you that a lot of people who voted for Donald Trump probably think he's a jerk. Whatever. They don't care. They don't care about all of the stuff, the slurring, the this, he's a felon, he's this. They don't care. They want somebody who's going to change their life. And as you say, the logical decision for a man of 25 who's in the process of having his entire existence cancelled by the Democrats. The only logical explanation is for him to vote. Why would he vote for himself to become an endangered species? That's what they're doing. Young white males, of course they're going to vote for Donald Trump.
Yeah, I hear all this. I don't dispute it. I just think this is as good as it gets. Maybe I'm a pessimist. I think this is as good as it gets this week, and we can talk more about the kind of meltdowns. I listened to half an hour of Pat Kenny today on News Talk. I happened to be in the car. The radio was on when I got into the car. Sarah is now drinking from a cup which has Lefty Tears written on it, if you're listening to this rather than watching.
Sorry.
You're really in rare form this week.
I actually use that cup. I use that cup every week, but there was a lot of Lefty Tears this week, which I'll get to. Go on.
Okay. So I was listening to Pat Kenny today. I got into the car. Now the radio's never on in the car. I presume Orla must have been in the car and turned on the radio or something. But I said, you know what? I won't turn it off. They're talking about the US election. Let's see what they're saying. And Pat Kenny was having a meltdown to it was embarrassing. I tweeted that it was just propaganda. I mean, he called Americans ignorant. He said that they didn't know what they were voting for. He said that they would pay for it, they would suffer, and it was embarrassing. It was embarrassing to listen to. And listeners will know I am the opposite to a Donald Trump fan. But there was absolutely no attempt to understand what has just happened or why, and that is consistent with the. I mean, I don't really think Kamala Harris lost this election as much as the American mainstream media lost this election.
Yeah,
because it just proved no one's listening to you anymore. They're not, and I think that's. By the way, I think that's dangerous in a way, but.
But also, does it not occur to any of the pundits in Ireland, of all of which were saying that Kamala Harris is going to win in a landslide, and it was grand, everything was wonderful? Does it not occur to them? It's so arrogant and superior. Does it not occur to them that maybe voters in America might know something more about what it's like to live and pay taxes and exist in America than they do? Like, the entire vibe of it is stupid, ignorant, poor people who don't know what to do, how to do what they're told. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's unbelievable. Maybe you don't know what you're talking about. Maybe those people are entitled to vote whatever way they want. I mean, is the outrage and the tone of just like there's no feeling for me that there will be any lesson learned here, that maybe if you're commenting on an election, that politics has fundamentally changed, that people care about things that you might not understand. And the way to start predicting elections or understanding voters is to sit down, cancel out all the noise in your head about how much better you are than everybody, and actually listen to what people are saying. Like,
yeah,
I mean it wasn't a close election, John. Like, it wasn't like really, really close, and people could say, "Oh, it was so tight," and Donald Trump won by a series. He didn't win the popular vote. It was a landslide. He absolutely annihilated her. It is a massive mandate. It is like there hasn't been a more successful result for Republicans, and I can't even remember how long it's been. So
2004 when George W. Bush did it.
Exactly. So every Irish political pundit who's crying into their microphone all this week about stupid people and how they voted because they were brainwashed and they don't know any better, would it not occur to you to just take a look at yourself and ask why you spectacularly called it wrong? Like, not even called it wrong mildly, spectacularly.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that's going to happen.
No.
I don't think that's going to happen because it's not about that. It's now about in Ireland, it's about the fear of contagion, right? It's what actually, and I think we had this conversation last week where you were saying what would happen if Trump won. And I said to you, well, it might help somebody like the Labour Party. And lo and behold, the next morning, the Labour Party were out. Ivana Bacik was going to stand up for, she was going to lead the line against Donald Trump. It was like, good luck, Ivana. And I think you're going to see that backlash. I mean, I've often talked about 2016 and Brexit and Trump happening in the 1 year. And then that was actually the birth of the misinformation industry. I don't know if you remember that. Yeah. Up until then, no one was really that concerned about Facebook ads and Twitter ads and social media. But then it was, we need an explanation for why this terrible, god-awful, massively unbelievable thing has happened, or two things have happened. And the answer was, well, people were misinformed. They read lies on Facebook. Dominic Cummings put in ads for Brexit and we didn't respond to them, and it was just misinformation and disinformation and Cambridge Analytica and all this stuff. Do you remember all that?
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, they went and they implemented all the kind of fact checking on Facebook and deleting posts and social media hygiene, all this sort of stuff. And then Donald Trump loses in 2020 and everything goes back to normal. And now, all of a sudden, after you've done all that, after you've had your 8-year campaign on misinformation, after you have done every step you can take as a liberal to make sure this terrible thing never happens again, not only has it happened again, it's happened on a bigger scale. He's won the popular vote this time. And by the way, Can I just say one thing on this? Because I get an awful lot of stick. I got stick during the campaign for saying Donald Trump has never won the popular vote. And people would scream at me, doesn't matter, it's an electoral college system. He doesn't need to win the popular vote. Isn't it great that he did? Isn't it great that he did from your perspective? Because no one can now say, oh, it's illegitimate. Most Americans didn't want him. Winning the popular vote is not necessary to win the election, but it's a really good thing to do because it demonstrates that a majority of your countrymen are on your side. It gives you a mandate that you don't necessarily have. No one can dispute your legitimacy. No one can say you're in office because of a rigged system. You're in office because you won the majority of the support for the American people. And that has happened to the left after 8 years of an attempt to make sure it would never happen again. So there is going to be there's going to be a doubling down on that, first of all, to make sure that it can never happen again. And I don't know what that's going to look like yet, but a lot of it's going to look like Ivana Bacik screeching.
But I also, what I find interesting as well about like Irish politicians this week, okay, fair enough, Simon Harris and Micheál Martin both came out and kind of congratulated Donald Trump, whatever. But they've spent the last few years absolutely slating him. And what I find interesting is that, we talk about, our political classes will talk about this special relationship between Ireland and America. But maybe, if this special relationship really exists between Ireland and America, it'd be wise to stay out of commenting on political the candidacy of people in America, lest they get elected and now you look like a bit of a fool when you go over with your shamrock. But I mean, if we need America so badly for our economy, maybe like when you're clearly, completely unqualified to make a prediction about elections, and by the way, call me guys, because like obviously I can help you with that, but if you're completely unqualified to make predictions about the outcomes of American elections, maybe you'd be wise to STFU when it comes to commenting on the candidates, because now, like, if the relationship is so special, have you not potentially damaged it by mouthing off about a candidate who's now won in a landslide? Where do you go from there?
Well, Simon Harris, who's our Taoiseach, called Donald Trump a ghoul.
Yeah.
Now, I stand accused, as we all know, of Trump Derangement Syndrome, but I have never used words like that to describe him, nor would I, because it's impolite, firstly. And secondly, I would know better, Sarah, than to get into an insult war with Donald Trump.
But also, you're not the Taoiseach of the country.
Simon Harris... Yes, I'm just saying, for Simon Harris's own sake, let's hope Donald Trump doesn't find out that Simon Harris called him a ghoul. Otherwise, Simon Harris might become the owner of his own Trumpy nickname, which would be amusing. But yeah, he has to go. We're presuming here the result of the other big political event of the week, which we'll get to in 10 minutes. But let's assume that Simon Harris is still Taoiseach next year. He's going to have to go to the White House and he's going to sit down, presenting his little bowl of shamrock to the man he called a ghoul, who is not known for, whatever else you might say about Donald Trump. He's well able to hold a grudge. So, we'll see how that goes.
No, he is able to hold a grudge, and he is childish and a bit petty. And so he may very well do something now. And maybe it would have been better to just not get involved. Do you know what I mean? It's just like, it's the kind of like, it was the hip, cool thing to do. And now you look like a bit of an idiot.
Look, Simon Harris looking like a bit of an idiot. Well, not the first time, won't be the last time. I just want to say a couple of thoughts while we're still on this topic. I mean, first of all, I have been very down on the idea of a second Trump presidency. I've stated the reasons for those in past podcasts. I don't really see the need to go over them again. But I do think there are a couple of reasons for optimism about his second term that I haven't mentioned. The first one is actually that he won the popular vote. Because I don't know, Sarah, if you remember his first term in office. He took office in 2017, and literally the first 3 weeks were just the biggest crowd ever was at my inauguration. I really won the popular vote. They rigged it in California, and obsessed with these nonsense things. And I think feeling a bit insecure in his victory. He has no reason to feel insecure anymore. He has just won a thumping mandate. And hopefully, psychologically, he'll feel a bit more secure to actually get on with the business of governing and block out the criticism. Maybe that's naive hope, but I think it might be. Secondly, obviously, he has won a thumping majority in the US Senate and is likely to hold the House of Representatives, so has the opportunity to push through some real serious legislation if he wants to do it. So his appointments will be key. But thirdly, and I think the thing that makes me hope most is that his victory alone might just sober up some of the more extreme progressives who've been causing his victory in the first place.
Yeah.
Like maybe, and maybe this is total naivety, maybe there will be enough people. I saw a Democratic congressman from New York tweeting today that like the Democrats lost because they were in hock to the far left on a whole range of stuff, like your issue of gender, but also prison sentences, crime, drug legalization, all that sort of stuff. And maybe they might just wake up and walk back to the center a little bit. And if his victory accomplishes that, then it'll be good for politics. And the last thing I think is really good from his victory is the fact, actually, that it's a repudiation of all those people who said the Trumpism was, or the right in general, is a white supremacist movement.
Yeah.
And I know there are definitely elements of that in his base. You see them online, the people who are like, Trump is for the whites. Trump won because he was able to peel away Hispanic voters and black voters from the Democratic Party, which is actually really good for Hispanics and black people because the Democrats can't take you for granted anymore. He won 40% of the Jewish vote in New York and more than that in the swing states, another huge Democratic constituency. So he's actually shattering the Democrats' support base, which has always been on kind of racial and ethnic lines. That can only be a good thing, whatever happens over the next 4 years. He's got 2 years really until the midterms to cement a lasting legacy. And this is the final reason for optimism, is that his electoral legacy is now secure. Donald Trump will always be the guy he's the second coming of Grover Cleveland. He's come back stronger. The one thing he lacks from his first term is a really secure political legacy of what laws did he put on the statute books, what things did he do that will last 100 years or even 50 years. The only thing he really has is the abolition of Roe versus Wade, which he himself doesn't seem that keen on. So he has a chance now to actually do something meaningful domestically. Let's see if he takes it. I'm not optimistic, but I think there are reasons to think this might be a slightly better version of Trump than we got the first time.
Well, that's a good kind of. I agree. I mean, I like, I have many criticisms, but I also, I don't buy into the kind of terror and fear about I'll get to the kind of inability to cope online from the last few days from certain people, but he hopefully will have learned some lessons. He's been gone for 4 years. Now he's back. He'll hit the ground running. He understands, there's anecdotally you've heard for a long time that he didn't actually expect to win in 2016. This time I think he did. And, hopefully he will be more legacy focused and do some of the things, particularly because I think a lot of people have obviously voted for him, but placed a lot of faith in his ability to turn things around and make a difference to the economy. And hopefully he does that. I'd also be, I would be, and one of the things I was thinking about a lot during his candidacy was that I would be more optimistic about his ability to bring peace to wars. By some interventions that he may or may not make. And I've always felt that, whatever side people are on or whatever, an end to the dying, it would be, in my gut feeling has always told me that he'll be better able to do that than she would have been. So I'm hopeful for that. But what I also think is that regardless of, what side you're on or whatever, like getting into this kind of absolute meltdown of terror about what's going to happen and, women are going to do this and this is going to happen and this is going to happen or whatever. He didn't do any of that stuff in his first term. Chill out. Like when Donald Trump was running the first time, it was, he's going to start a war and he's going to do this. And there's a lot of kind of hysteria. And I've seen nothing but hysteria from certain groups all this week. And I actually tweeted about this, so I want to specifically bring it up. Because I saw a lot of people talking about their kids and how terrified their kids were this week or whatever. And I tweeted about it. And my general point is, I just feel, so my tweet was basically that I have an 8-year-old and a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old. And on Wednesday and Thursday, or today and yesterday, and well, this goes out Friday, today's Thursday. But they are utterly oblivious to what has happened. They don't know, they don't care, because they are children. And the amount of people I saw on Twitter talking about how their 5-year-old or their 7-year-old or their 8-year-old, why are you absolute weirdo, talking to your kid and freaking your kid out with your own, like projecting your own nonsense onto your child and then using it for woke kudos online that your child is terrified. It's weird and creepy. We should be protecting the childhood of children. If nuclear weapons were pointed at Ireland tomorrow, I wouldn't tell my kids about it because they wouldn't understand. And what would the point be of terrorizing them? They're children. Like, people need to kind of rein it in, calm down, and certainly not be infecting their children with their self-obsessed, narcissistic paranoia about the world. Like, life will move on. Like, Donald Trump will do some things, hopefully very well, particularly for people who live in America, and some things not very well. But freaking your kids out and then using it to score bonus points online is a weird and creepy thing to do, and you should stop it right now.
There was, I don't know if people are familiar with there's a comedy skit in the UK from a comedian, David, can't think of his name, I'm sorry, the little guy. He did this sketch about the football ads where he took the mick off Sky Sports years ago, where he was doing one of their ads about kind of like, this weekend loads of stuff is going to happen and, you know, Liverpool are away. Anyway, the punchline of it was, it will never finally be decided who has won the football, which is true.
Yeah.
You're never beat. You know, Manchester United are down at the moment. There will come, presumably, it could be 80 years, but at some point in the future, Manchester United will win another league title. Liverpool will go through a period that's terrible.
Yeah.
You know, Real Madrid will go 10 years without winning something. You know, these things will happen. There will be another democratic president.
Yeah.
That is an inevitability. I see sometimes people going, oh, it's Trump now, it's Vance in 4 years, and then Vance again, and then Donald Trump Jr., and then you know, like it's now a monarchy.
Oh no,
right?
I've also seen people saying
Democrats are going to win another election.
He'll refuse to leave at the end of the 4 years, and he'll cancel all future elections, and he'll just be the leader forever. Yeah, okay, Karen, calm down.
In summation, it will never finally be decided who has won the politics, right? And if you're in politics, you're going to go through some crushing defeats. I mean, in Ireland, God, Sarah, you and I know about crushing defeats, right?
Yeah.
And then every now and again, you have a good day.
Yeah.
So enjoy the good days when they're there and be prepared for another crushing defeat to come, which is why I take some joy in the Own the Lib stuff. I really do. But I don't take too much joy in it. And actually, I feel sorry for some of them. Sky News have Anna Botting over in I think, Pennsylvania, covering the election. And yesterday she did this, I don't know, maybe some of you saw it. It's probably on YouTube by now. She did this segment with kind of young girls who are protesting the abortion issue. And she had this one young woman on, and she might have been 17, she might have been 18, and she was in a high state of distress. And she was there, and she was literally screaming into the camera that Donald Trump is going to invade Russia. Donald Trump is going to invade China. Donald Trump wants to conquer the whole... You saw it?
Yeah.
And I was just thinking, like, this poor person has completely lost all sense of perspective. And I think it's very important for none of us ever to lose perspective. And these issues are important.
But why would that be? Because her mind is infected with the hysteria that's been spread by people about this. I'm all for young people getting involved in politics, but like, really, she should be at a disco getting off with someone. You know what I mean? Like, not like screaming and roaring as if the world is about to end. Donald Trump was the president before. I mean, life continued. It'll continue again. As you say, there will be a Democrat elected president again, maybe in 4 years, maybe in 8. And your life will just continue to go on. You don't need to be screaming and roaring and, like, you know, making a show of yourself, frankly, on the internet about it.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, I think a final thought on this is just the kind of, from me anyway, maybe you have a final thought on this, but for me, like, this was inevitable, because this is not about Donald Trump necessarily. I wrote a piece after the election where I said, I'll say 2 very positive things about him personally, which are, you know, there's a lot obviously I dislike about him, but there's 2 things I like about him. First of all, he's utterly relentless. He absolutely refused. I mean, and I think actually, the more the indictments piled up, the more basically he has the personality of a rhinoceros. Just keeps marching forward, and I think there's something admirable about that. Even if you don't agree with him, you know, there's an awful lot of people who have been taken down by the stuff that's been thrown at him. He hasn't been taken down. That's really admirable. That's number one. Number 2,
including bullets.
People think about it. Yeah, including. You got a bad case of the old Trumpomania this week, Sarah. You do, but he doesn't care what people think about him. And those two things, I think, are deeply appealing to a post-cancel culture electorate. Because you guys who have been dominant in the culture, and I'm not talking to our listeners, and I'm not talking to you, Sarah. You know, we all know who I'm talking about. You guys over there who've been dominant in our culture, who've been canceling people, who've been silencing people, who've been getting people fired from their jobs. This is a guy you couldn't cancel. You've thrown everything at him. You couldn't cancel him. And the people have gone, yeah, that's my guy. Guy can't be cancelled.
Yeah.
So maybe learn a lesson from that. Maybe stop cancelling people. Maybe you can stop creating Trumps if you really hate him so much. But, you know, no one's going to take our advice. Yeah,
I think for me, you know, you get the reputation of being the, you know, the one with Trump derangement syndrome. And for me, it's not really about, the reason why I'm happy is because it's not about Donald Trump at all. Donald Trump has got nothing to do with this in a weird way for me. This is a win for issues I care about and people that I care about. In other words, there is a growing, they exist in Ireland as well, growing demographic of people who feel disenfranchised, isolated, not listened to, not important, talked down to, ignored. They tend to be, and this is why it's not a race thing in this election, it's a class thing. They tend to be poorer, it's particularly in Ireland, poor, and they're sneered at, talked down to. And this, to me, was a win for them. And that's why I liked it, because those people, and people could say, oh, they were brainwashed, and they weren't. They knew exactly what they were doing. They voted for a better life than they're getting, and they got sick and tired of being talked to like they're idiots. And it was nothing to do with race. And that's why I like it, because I think that the working class, the poor, the uneducated, the people who don't ascribe to, you know, men in dresses being in the women's changing room, the people who don't accept just, you know, that any question about immigration makes you a racist, all those people who've been talked down to for years in Ireland, in America, and across the world, they're on the march, they're pushing back, and it's a win for that, and I'm happy about that.
Yeah, but that brings me on nicely to what I wanted to say here, which is that I don't apologize for what viewers have called Trump derangement syndrome. I don't apologize for it.
Why should you?
I think this has been... But I want to explain it, because now he's won. Now we can maybe the heat of the election is gone, and you know that I'm not like trying to influence some Americans to vote for Kamala Harris, as somebody accused me of a couple of weeks ago. The election's over. He won. But it's precisely because of what you just said. You know, this needs to be a political moment, not just a cultural moment. And right now it's like a cultural moment. It's like, we have won, the left are crushed, Donald Trump is returning, all is well with the world. Power, when you win it, is for using and for wielding. How are we in the mess we're in at the moment? We're in a mess at the moment because liberals have gotten into power and wielded that power. Kamala Harris, the ad that won Trump the election was about how Kamala Harris, when she was in office as Attorney General of California, then as a US Senator, then as Vice President, organized the taxpayers to pay for free gender surgeries for transgender prisoners. That power was wielded by a politician. Donald Trump is now going to have 4 years to wield power. What is he going to do with it? My concern with him has always been that he talks a good game, but what does he actually do with that power? I think that that is where I've never had confidence in him. And we'll see how the next 4 years go. And I am open to being proven wrong. And if you're back here next year, Sarah, talking about the wonderful first year Donald Trump has had in office, I'll be delighted to be proved wrong. But when people say I had Trump derangement syndrome, that is what my concern is, has been, and will be until he proves me wrong.
Fair enough.
But we'll see.
Fair enough.
Let's move on. We've done half an hour on Trump. By the time this is going out, Simon Harris might finally be in his state Mercedes, or I think they've downgraded from Mercedes now. I think they drive A8s or something, don't they? On his way up to see Frodo Baggins to get the Dáil dissolved and the election underway. He probably might ask, by the way, one last thing, Michael D. Higgins, where his congratulatory letter for the new American president is. I know he sent one to the Iranians. You might get, saying, Simon, when you're up there, you could ask Michael D. Where his letter to Donald Trump is. But anyway, he's called the election, Sarah. What do you make of it?
I mean, I kept, when they were dancing around the election and, saying the date and not saying the date and all, I kind of thought there must be some kind of strategy at play that I was missing. But it turns out there wasn't. It was just chaos. And, glad it's finally over, but it must be the most underwhelming, unexciting, unsnappy snap election that ever snapped.
I think it's a disgrace.
Go on.
I think it's a disgrace. I think what's happening is a disgrace. And let's be honest about it. And I'm amazed that political correspondents haven't talked about it. I have huge respect for Pat Leahy in the Irish Times. Maybe he's written this. I haven't seen it. Great respect for you. You and I talked about our great respect for Fionn Sheehan in the Independent. Maybe he's written this. I haven't seen it. We are having a compressed 3-week election campaign. The election is being called today, as you are watching this on Friday, the 8th of November, and you're going to be voting in 21 days' time on Friday, the 29th of November. 3 weeks is all you get to render your verdict on the last 5 years and the next 5 years. It is all the time candidates get to, maybe new or independent candidates get to get on the ballot, buy posters, get a campaign underway. Meanwhile, Fine Gael have been spending God knows how much money on Facebook advertisements in the last week. I don't know if you're on Facebook, you'll have seen them. Fianna Fáil,
Bus stops,
it is
billboards.
All of which, by the way, so listeners maybe don't know this, all that money doesn't count as their election spending because it's outside the election window. So they can spend as much as they want up until today when the election is called, and then the spending limits kick in.
So
it is
cynical.
deeply, deeply cynical and anti-democratic. And there's obviously the hope is we're ahead in the polls. Let's wham bam, thank you, ma'am, this in 3 weeks, and hope the electorate don't wake up in the meantime. And it'll all be done before you know it. And no one else has a chance to get lucky. And by the way, our friends in the media will make sure that the Fine Gael messaging grid, which will be taxes today, economy tomorrow, crime the day after, never gets on to the vexed issues that we don't want to talk about, because there won't be a day in the Fine Gael messaging grid to talk about the bike shed or transgenders in prisons or immigration. It'll just be the Fine Gael message for 3 weeks. Now, very effective, but deeply cynical, which is why I think that one of the things that should happen in this country is that we should have a statutory 6-week election campaign to give people time to air the issues. That's my view.
Yeah,
Am I wrong?
I heard on the radio, about the German so-called snap election. And then when they were breaking down how it works, it was like a snap election is being called, but it actually won't happen until like March. That's their version of a snap election. But ours is like 3 weeks. But I mean, I think you're right, but I don't think it will be a 3-week campaign because it's been going, as you say, for weeks. So, but I think...
Well, it hasn't, because the rules are structured like in such a way that it hasn't, Sarah, because outside a formal election campaign, and that begins today, the media don't have balance obligations. So smaller parties don't have to get a look in on RTE. There are no debates. You can just have your government and your opposition. The other candidates from outside the system don't get a look in. As I say, you can spend all this money outside the formal rules of an election campaign. You can do what the big parties do and plaster up posters like Mary Siri Carney in Dublin, having posters up along the Dublin Marathon, kind of going, "Hi, I'm Mary Siri Carney," whatever her name is, and I wish you run well or run towards the finish line or something. All these bullshit tactics that they do, which screw the little guy candidate. Now, the little guy candidate probably ain't going to win anyway, but why do you have to screw him? Why do you have to screw the guy who is just running because he thinks the people of Donegal deserve a voice on Micah, or because he's from Wicklow and he's concerned about what happened in Newtown Mount Kennedy, or whatever?
Yeah.
It's so cynical, and I wish the voters would punish them for it, but the voters won't.
But what I mean is that the campaign has been on for a few weeks, but the thing is that, like, I'm more, I suppose, cynical. I mean, the campaign being on and the campaign not being on doesn't feel to me like it's going to make any difference to whether or not Fine Gael, Fianna Fáil or Green Party TDs or ministers are streeled around the studio, politically speaking, by a presenter who's asking them hard questions. Nothing's going to change. They're not going to get pulled over the coals on anything. So what's the difference? Like, this feels to me, I mean, I've always said that there might be some issue that would ignite the campaign and make the campaign all about that. And that may very well still happen. There's 3 weeks. It could happen. But I think that this has been designed to be an unbelievably boring campaign, probably like designed to have a low voter turnout, unmotivated, kind of bored electorate, what I would refer to as the stabilitarians, your Fine Gaelers, your Fianna Fáilers, your kind of, your bases of each party will turn out, and ultimately it'll be kind of uninteresting. I think Fine Gael at the moment, are on course to do well, and they know it. That's why they're having the general election, and they're on course to do well, partly because they did, poorly in a lot of areas the last time, and they'll reclaim those seats. Partly because so that there's constituencies where they got no TDs where they will naturally win them back again. I think Fianna Fáil the same, couple of gains, maybe a couple of losses somewhere in the middle, and then Sinn Féin will have a bad day. I think it's a kind of at the moment, a really boring election, and I agree with you that it's cynical and you think it's disgraceful that they're having a 21-day campaign and all that, but I think that if we had a media that was more robustly challenging the government on what they're doing or not doing, 21 days would be enough to hockey them out of it, but they're not going to. So whether it was 6 weeks or 8 weeks or the last fucking, excuse my language, 4 years, if they're not going to do anything, if the media aren't going to ask the hard questions, well, what's the difference?
Yeah, that's fair. And the other factor,
said the F word there.
You did. You let. Donald Trump is having an issue. When you put on that MAGA hat, that's what happens. That's what happened. You put on the MAGA hat, and all of a sudden, you turned into Sarah Trump, which I'm sure, as I say, the viewers will enjoy. Anyway, the other factor here, Sarah, is that who do you vote for? Like, seriously, who do you vote for? I was going through today, I was looking at the candidates who've currently been listed for my constituency to Prairie North, and Aontú have just thrown a candidate into the mix there. And as things stand, for full disclosure, I'm voting Aontú. Not because loads of time for Peadar Tóibín, not necessarily on board with the Aontú suite of policies, but they're the only ones I can vote for in good conscience.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people in the country are still in my boat, and that doesn't mean they're going to do that. A lot of people who are in my boat are going to vote for Fine Gael or Fianna Fáil because they think, there's no alternative and we need stability in the country. You know what? Fair enough. But it's just a depressing cast of parties and candidates.
Well,
I think Labour, Greens.
Well, I mean, honestly, I think that as I said the last time we spoke last week, that it is constituency by constituency, and some constituencies, like I mentioned, Laois would have good independents like Elaine Mullally, but not all constituencies have that. However, I made this point to you on the phone the other day, and I think that for me personally, and my suite of opinions and the issues that I feel very strongly about at the moment, I feel that it would be almost hypocritical, despite the fact that I think Aontú and Peadar Tóibín are, on a number of issues, quite left of me, particularly on some of the economic stuff. I think a few things. I think ultimately fair is fair. I think Peadar Tóibín is a really good politician. I think he takes issues really seriously. I think he does his homework. I think he went into the Dáil, and when nobody else was really doing it, he stood up against those two referenda. He stood up for women. He stood up for women in the Constitution. He brought his arguments. He toured the country. He did practically all the debates on that issue because no one else. And he was the only one who stood against that. He's the only one who stands up about the issue of transgenderism. I mean, in terms of, I know there are other, don't come at me, I know there are senators and other people, I'm just talking about in terms of Dáil parties at the moment, who stand up for some of the issues that I feel very passionate about. I also think that a lot of people, might not know this, but Aontú would have been very, very just under the percentage vote that they needed the last time for funding as a political party. I think Peadar and those candidates deserve that this time. I think Aontú is good for democracy. I think he's a very good politician, and I think that they're deserving of that. I think that in this Dáil term, he's done his work.
So there's Sarah's cards on the table, folks. That's where her vote is going. Mine, I should say, and I said, at the moment, there's an Aontú candidate in my constituency who will get my number one vote because there's no real alternative. Because I agree with you, like Peadar Tóibín, but he's off to my left on a number of issues. And he knows that. We've spoken about it. There's no dispute between us or anything. But for example, were I in Galway West, I would vote for Noel Thomas from Independent Ireland. I just would. Were I in Kerry, I'd probably vote for Healy Rae. Were I, there are politicians all across the country who I would consider. If it was Tipperary South, we'd vote for Matty McGrath. like I did the last time, Michael Fitzmaurice. So there are options out there. And I think it's about finding the vote in your constituency that you can tolerate the most. For you and I, that both appears to be into at the moment, but that does not. I mean, unless people are screaming at us in the comments, that is not. We're not endorsing a political party on this podcast. We're just being transparent about you with where our personal votes are leaning at the moment.
Yeah.
But let's get back to the bigger issue of the campaign. I mean, I fear, Sarah, this is going to turn into a kind of punditry campaign where it's going to be about like Fine Gael's targeting a seat here and will Fianna Fáil go back into coalition with Fine Gael and who will do a deal with who instead of the issues. And I think it will suit the political parties down to the ground, particularly the three big ones, if those are the questions they're getting every day. And I think it really needs, we have an editorial which was out this morning. If you're watching this podcast, go and read it, where we basically say, look, this is your chance as an electorate to render a verdict on how this government has actually performed over the last 5 years. And that verdict, in my view, should be you're fired. Because, yeah, they've done some good things. I mean, they've managed the public finances okay. In fairness, at the slight cost of relations with the UK for a little while, they did a good job defending the country on Brexit. I'm not going to deny them that. They've done some good things in Northern Ireland, getting the institutions back up. And in various areas they've run just fine. But I was going through it writing that editorial with my colleagues in the editorial board, and we were just chatting about it. And the list of stuff from bike sheds to nanny state laws to that ridiculous deposit return scheme to carbon taxes to men in women's prisons to
Children's Hospital, scoliosis.
The alcohol thing in supermarkets that where we now have to fence off the wine and you're not allowed to buy it before 12 o'clock on Sunday. Like vape juice, that's got to go as well. Just the most pathetic, interfering, misery guts government we have ever had. And that's before you get into any question of immigration, for example. So, yeah, I think they deserve to be fired, but I fear those issues are just not going to be interrogated in the campaign at all. Because who's going to raise them? Labour Party?
Yeah, and the media aren't going to challenge it. So, I don't know. As it stands, I think it's looking like it might be a very boring campaign. But John, and I know you're knocking around politics long enough to know that this time next week we could be in here chatting about some earth-shattering political event that's happened, some scandal that's come out, something that's blown the whole campaign wide open. So, and to be honest, I hope that's what happens because I think that the politics and the public do better out of that. It's to go, to talk about American politics, I mean, and Irish politics. The thing that I'm the most passionate about is I think that the country does better out of a very robust, smart political discourse. I think that smart people on left, right and centre, whatever, hashing out ideas and having really robust arguments about big topics is good for the country. And I think a coronation of Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael and maybe a slight change of the Greens for somebody else into government next time for another 4 years is bad for Ireland. It's not good. And they will take it as an endorsement of hate speech, the hate speech bill and the nonsense with gender and immigration and every other policy that's been annoying people for the last while. And things will just continue to go on. We'll be sitting down for a turkey and ham and going, all right, everything's just the same. And I don't think that's good for politics. I don't think that's good for Ireland. And I think we could do better.
Yeah, although I saw the Sunday Independent Ireland Thinks poll last week had as the preferred government of the majority of people, I think it's something like 70% of people said that their preferred government was Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael and independents. And I'm just telling you, folks, maybe come back and look at this video in 6 weeks. If I'm wrong, you're not going to get that. You're going to get Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael plus small left-wing party, whether it's the Soc Dems, Labour or the Greens. Because for some reason, there's this psychological attachment in Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael to being in coalition with a progressive party. So I think this election is twofold. It's going to be, are Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael going to keep pace with each other so that they can still justify the rotating Taoiseach nonsense? I don't think so.
No.
And number two, who's going to emerge from that Labour, Green, Soc Dem bunch to be the we'll make up the numbers and ruin your lives people? Because we're going to have a we'll make up the numbers and ruin your lives party in government.
So you don't think that even if you think Independent Ireland, say if they got 7 or 8 seats, you don't think that Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael would go into government with them?
Oh no! See, this is the thing Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael do. This is the trick. I've been around politics long enough to notice this, Sarah. Maybe you haven't admitted to yourself yet you're more loyal to Fianna Fáil than I ever was to them. But what they do is they talk a good game to you in private, and you go into the pub and you sit down and you chat to Fianna Fáil backbencher, and you go, "Oh, the Greens! I can't stand the Greens. They make us do all these things, and we'd be better off without them." Really, you've heard that. Tell me if you haven't heard that. You've heard that?
Yeah.
Everyone's heard that. Everyone who talks to these people has heard that. But then when they get the opportunity, if they are ever forced to choose between the person who wants to kill the herd and impose carbon taxes and the person who might be described as right wing, they will pick the small left wing party every single time. The only time they didn't do it was Bertie Ahern. Since the PDs have gone, they don't have an option anymore. And the PDs were fine because the PDs wore suits. They weren't Michael and Danny Healy, right?
Yeah.
The PDs were lads who wore suits and knew about numbers. We can work with those people, but we can't work with the Michael Collinses of the world or the Matty McGraths of the world or fellas who might be anyway skeptical of the European Union or anything like that. They will pick every single time. They will pick their urbane social betters. And if you're a Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael TD, psychologically, Labour, Soc Dems and Greens are your urbane social betters. I mean, they went to college there. So that is, I think, a big part of the psychology of this, which is why I laugh at me if I'm wrong. I don't think I'm going to be wrong on this one.
I mean, I suppose it'll really it will really quite simply come down to numbers. And, I'm not sure I see there will be independence, but I'm not sure I see, enough numbers to make it up potentially. Soc Dems, I don't think so. Labour, I don't think so. So it would have to be a real group. You know what I mean? Like how many seats are the Soc Dems and Labour going to get? 3?
Well, I haven't done a full projection. I mean, Labour did a lot better in the local and European elections than you'd think. They did.
Yeah.
And I don't cheer that. They did a lot better in the local and European elections than I would have predicted they would have done. So there's still clearly that vote there. They'll take some votes back off the Greens from disillusioned Greens who are annoyed that the Greens did everything they said they do, but they didn't think it would affect them. The usual stuff.
I think you're comparing apples and oranges there though a little bit, because I think that, or whatever that expression is, I think that Labour, ever since they got massively cocky back around 2011 and thought, the Gilmore Gale and all that, and then went into government, broke all of the promises and all of the things they said they were going to do and got hockeyed out of it the next election. Ever since then, I think they've kind of learned a lesson that they have at local level, they have very hard-working councillors because they don't take their vote for granted at all, and they do the work. I can Dermot, what is his surname? From Labour councillor Ranelagh up there.
Dermot Looney. Oh, Dermot. Yes, we know who you're talking.
Yeah,
about.
They're all like he's a really
Dermot Lacey.
He's a really hard working councillor. A lot of those old school Labour types, like they're not. I don't agree that they're necessarily indicative of a national Labour vote, if you know what I mean. So I think that I think that the local elections versus a general election for Labour will be quite, a local and European elections versus a general election for Labour will be quite different. I could be proven wrong, but I think that their ground game in terms of at a local level is just quite good, and and that held up on that occasion. I think that the Soc Dems aren't the same in that they're more of a national kind of vote. But I still think Holly Kearns is probably in a spot of bother about her seat. I don't think they're going to make any shakes. So you're talking about small numbers.
Maybe Jennifer Whitmore in Wicklow as well. But they've got Cian O'Callaghan in Dublin. We get into punditry. I don't think we'll make this the punditry episode. We will do, because we are going to, we're talking about how boring the election campaign will be. And Sarah and I have already agreed that from next week we're doing this podcast 2 times a week to make up for how exciting the election will be. So Sarah, I hope it's as exciting as it will be. And one of the things that might make it exciting is if more clipboards get, if we have more GBH against clipboards. What was your reaction to that story during the week with Roderick O'Gorman?
Well, what is the actual story? Because initially it looked quite I mean, I think that people will agree with you that when it first broke onto the news, it was on Twitter and stuff. When I saw it, it looked like quite a serious assault, and I'm now questioning that based on what I've seen. Do you have any intel on that? By the way, I'll just go. You obviously shouldn't put your hands on anybody ever. I would like to think that goes without saying, but I'll say it anyway. You obviously shouldn't put your hand on anybody who's out canvassing. You and I have talked before a number of times about how, with the exception of that one time that you're about to do this podcast, we're not even interested or keen on people being horrible or rude to canvassers, because it's canvassing is hard, and you're putting yourself out there. So that all said,
can I just say I wasn't rude that day. I was angry, but I wasn't rude.
Yeah,
I told him
rude, angry, whatever. But
Um,
so you obviously shouldn't put your hands on someone. But from what I've seen, I'll let you, because you might know more about the story than I do.
To answer your question, I don't. To answer your question, I can only go on what the Gardaí have said, which is that there was an assault and there was criminal damage to a clipboard, which I think is the phrase of the Garda Chief on it. I will say this. I do remember years ago, and I can't remember where it was, but I remember being in Dublin on a canvas in somewhere in Pembroke. And I remember not me, but the way you canvass in teams.
Yeah.
And there was a team to my right, say they went up to a door and they met a particularly irate voter who, in the course of telling them to fuck off out of there, basically went like that with his hand and knocked the clipboard, and probably would have touched them as well in the process. Now, it sounded a lot like something like that to me. There was no mention in the reporting of a weapon, for example, or that there was any particular threat to Roderick O'Gorman's health, life, or well-being. Just sounded like a very angry voter who did something stupid that he shouldn't have done and that no one should ever do. But yeah, I'm kind of freaked. I'm kind of amused by the sudden, oh my God, it's dangerous out there for politicians. It's terrible, it's terrible, it's terrible. No one asks why. Why is it dangerous out there for politicians? Why is everyone so angry? And it's comes back to the thing we were starting at the start of the podcast about the Trump thing. Talk to the people in your country, find out why they're so angry.
Yeah.
Ask them some questions. Go interview the people who are shouting at Roderick O'Gorman and ask, why are you shouting at Roderick O'Gorman, rather than kind of acting as if it's just the electorate is like a feral beast out there and we must keep our politicians safe as they wander into the arena with the lions, tends to be the tone of the coverage. And that is what drives me batty. Not that, obviously, you shouldn't ever. I mean, I think you can do what I did, which is give a canvasser who comes to your door a piece of your mind. But the moment you raise your hand, you've lost all moral authority and moral argument. So don't do that. Besides, you'll just end up being featured in a journal article about the lack of civility in Irish politics for those people. Spare me. Who knows? But I think we're going to see more of that. That's the point I was making. I think we're going to see more of that over the course of the campaign, because I think a lot of people are very angry. And I think that a lot of people aren't going to take the very good advice you and I have just given them, Sarah. And I think there's going to be more of that. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw some jostling of somebody in the street. I wouldn't I think some politicians who make the mistake of going to the wrong town, that's been pissed off one too many times. I think that could be the stuff that shakes up the campaign. Well, for example, I don't, if for example, a leading government politician was to go to, I don't know, Newtown Kennedy or Ross Gray, I can see something newsworthy happening there. I don't think it should, but that's the kind of situation I'm talking about.
But I think that, the important thing for people to take away from the American election is that, if you are angry with the government, your power is your vote, not jostling somebody's clipboard. That doesn't work. That doesn't do anything. And it's, not appropriate at all. You go out and in a lot of constituencies in the local and European elections, it's well established. Niall Boylan, I was, obviously heavily involved in that campaign. Turnout in some of the areas where Niall's vote was extremely good was very low. There was a lot of spoiled votes. So if you're angry with the government, the thing to do is to show that with your vote. It's not to start screaming and roaring at people. That just and then that becomes the story. The people power of the electorate has just been demonstrated in the United States. So if you feel a certain way, if you're living in Ross Cray or Newtown Mount Kennedy and you feel a certain way, well, pick the candidate who represents the views that you have. Tell the government in as politely as you can manage when their representatives come canvassing exactly what you feel and why you're not voting for them, and then go out and vote. That's the way you win.
Yeah. Well, you have 3 weeks to make up your minds up, and Sarah and I will be here 6 times between now and voting day. It'll all come and pass very quickly. And also, I think we're going to do, we might be in the RDS on result day if you're a real nerd. We might even bring in some politicians and grill them. Sarah, you can wear your MAGA hat and scare them all away.
It's not mine. I borrowed it. I borrowed it just to tease you.
Okay. Well, considering me well teased. All right. We will leave it there. We've been going at this for 59 minutes and about 40 seconds. So I think I'll wrap it up by saying thank you very much to Sarah for joining me and not ribbing me too hard for getting last week's election wrong. But actually, do you know what I'm really annoyed about? It ruined my 10 predictions for the year. I was on course for I had 9 out of 10 basically locked down, and now I'm not going to get any better.
And I, on the other hand, between the referendums and the Sinn Féin vote, and now kind of working on a sort of an almost perfect record of my predictions, and it's very stressful. I'm going to get really anxious about the general election. I'm going to feel completely pressurized to get it right.
Yes, as you should. All right, look, we'll leave it there. Thanks so much for joining us. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, viewers. Thank you, listeners, indeed, for those of you on Spotify, Apple, and all those other things I can't work. We will be back sometime next week for our first special extra election podcast. But until then, that was the week that really was. Talk to you soon. Take care.